Hey, okay, so I am stick clipping my way up this new route that I bolted because I need to paint the bolts. So they've got this really bright red epoxy, which is super strong, but also quite obnoxious looking. So I'm gonna go up here, paint all the bolts, make them nice and camouflaged into the rock where you're not gonna see them unless you're actively looking for them. And so in this video, I'll just show you the process of how I go about doing that. Okay, so to start with, I'm lead rope soloing with a stick clip on me. And I've got an anchor, not on the ground, but on the first bolt. It's fixed to the first bolt of this route on the other side. And then I'm kind of just going a 1-bolt anchor because I'm not actually gonna be on the rope. I'm gonna be just stick clipping. So I'm okay with it. I'm gonna be doing a slightly different setup this time. Normally I would go all the way to the top, fix the rope, come down, go to the bottom, jug up and clean as I go. But I also wanna hang the draws because I'm gonna try to send this new route today. So I'm just going to basically stick clip up one and work on the bolt below. Now the reason why I can do that is because the bolts are really close together on this route, and they're close together because we've got this wall behind us. So when I was bolting this, I was really stressing out about what are these falls gonna be like. And I used temporary bolts in each of these spots. And I had a top rope and a mock lead. And so what happened was I would pretend that I'm doing a fall, like a clipping fall, and I would have my mock lead belayer hold me tight, and I would have the top rope belayer lower me, basically the world's slowest lead fall. And we would see where I would end up. And was any concern back here? And it turned out it was actually super safe. I was planning on calling this route R-rated, even though the bolts are so close, but it turns out that it's actually really safe. You would have to have a real nincompoop of a belayer to screw you over here. Let's get started. I'm gonna take this piece off. I get these cheapo brushes and normally I cut them right about here, but I forgot. I get a big handful. These ones, but no climate. So there are some pros and cons to having an uncut brush. And so I'm just going to appreciate some of those pros, which are it's easier to feather out when you have a sloppy glue job. So this was a really good glue job because it was able to stay contained. I do wish I had placed a little bit more on top of that just for aesthetics, but as far as strength, it's perfect. This is a case where it's slightly sloppy, where it had to splooge out because I tried to get it around this top section here. And so there's just a little here. So what an uncut brush is nice for just a light dab. Now the trick to this is less is more. A lot of times people will try to just paint everything, and you don't want to do any of that. You don't want a thick brush of paint. You want just a little bit. So I like to lift my lid, and I'm just going to reach in here, dab, dab, and then I'm going to close it. Close it immediately or you're going to spill it. If you have too much paint on your brush, this is going to look really bad right here. So if you have too much, start by painting the bolt first. Now, painting the bolt itself is less important than painting the glue. Titanium, for one, is really matte and not very reflective. So the titanium doesn't really have to be painted, but it is nice. So now I'm going to lift this up, tap, turn, tap. Now you can see there are some sections that aren't fully thick painted. That's totally fine. So that looks really good, but let's take it one step farther. In here, I have a brown. So now I'm just gonna kind of dab some brown, and it's a little shiny right now because the paint is wet, but later it'll become less shiny. So let's inspect this. So before, it's very bright red. After, look at that beauty. This is super easy with the bolts so close together. Now, of course, some old curmudgeons will probably get pissy about the bolts being too close together and how supposedly they'd rather break their tailbone on the wall behind, but people are funny. Okay, so now I'm gonna paint this bolt right here. I might even have some paint left on this brush, so I'm gonna use that thin paint, the really thin, dryish paint on the brush to get these outer materials. If the paint was too thick on the brush, this would look disastrous. So we're really just barely putting any paint on it. And you'll notice on this one, I didn't even apply any fresh paint to the brush at all for the glue. This is really a case of less is more. And look at that. Barely put any paint. So I'm just getting my paint from the lid. I don't need to, you know, dip it. If I dip the brush, it's gonna be way too much paint. So I'm just gonna, oh, look at that, that's flawless. Now, I paint the whole bolt, generally, but of course where the quick draw rubs, it's gonna take that paint off. But that's okay, you know? It's not gonna damage any draws or anything. Wow, that is really good. Beautiful, little dab right there. This uncut brush is actually working out really well today. I'm kind of starting to think I might prefer uncut. So here's a spot where we had to keep changing our minds about where bolts would go. A lot. This holds kept breaking and clipping stances were changing, and we're trying to figure out how to make sure you can clip it for the chimney version or the face climb version and not hit this wall behind you. It was surprisingly extremely complicated. It started out easy when I was just climbing the chimney, but then when I realized you could climb the face also, things got really complicated. Really, really complicated. So normally I like to wear gloves with these, but forgot them. Filling a 3/8 inch hole here, shove it over the top and scrape it, and then just keep filling from the center rather than trying to make like a bullet that fits in the hole. If you do it this way, it'll really shove up against the walls and be a really strong, strong patch. Then just kind of feather it out. It's crazy how much rock broke here. And then it kept changing. That's another benefit to the screws is as you climb the route on the screws and the route continues to break and change, you can make these alterations that you can't make with glue ends. Take my brush, just dab. Nothing crazy, just dab. Where is it? Can you find the 3 holes that were there just a minute ago? Where are they? There's one. There's 2, and 3 is right there, invisible. That epoxy will cure, and it will be rock solid, and those holes never existed. Pretty cool, right? Check this out. So while I was drilling the notch, the drill bumped out and went bop, 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 and you got this up and right. So what I'm gonna do here, because that's not very aesthetic, is I'm gonna take just a little bit of putty. I don't need very much. Mix up the putty until it's nicely done. Now I'm just gonna do a little swipe. Now it's gonna look weird at first. Definitely weird at first, but we'll be patient. Just go thumb it in there. Take my little leftover. I put too much right there. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab this little paper towel in here, and I'm just gonna kind of dab it with some chalk. And this is gonna give it texture right now. So now, in a couple of days, when that chalk is washed off with the morning mist, that's gonna have the flawless texture that we want. Paint in the taint right there. I like to paint on the outside here because it is visible and the ropes don't rub there. Boom. All right. Usually when I'm painting the bolts, I'm off on some angle or something weird like that. So I like to just get my hook here and then paint away. And my hook gets all painty, but who cares? It's a hook. Now I'm using this really, really, really dry brush that doesn't have very much paint on it. Now I want to get the bolt itself. So I'm gonna, well actually before I reload the brush to paint there, I will fill this hole. So I don't want to create like a bullet or a slug that goes in because it doesn't grab the holes and I've seen these plugs come out. Instead, I want to create like a little smash ball and I'm just going to smash it in through the center and kind of push it towards the side. So I'm pushing in and out and then just kind of like folding it in. As it's doing this, it's shoving the epoxy against the sides of the hole. In my bag, I have 4 different colors of paint. And so I'm just gonna really finesse this until I get the right mixture from those 4 colors. And sometimes you'll see it'll come out like that as the epoxy expands, kind of bubbles out. It's kind of interesting. And then I like to just kind of feather the edges. So look at that little pop it. There we go. And heat up. You know it's ready to go solid when it gets real warm. There's the unpainted epoxy, and there's a blob that looks just like it. But I'm gonna paint that and really blend it in. So take a little mental image of that before. I've got these to clean up. Sometimes that happens, it's embarrassing, but I'm showing you guys the truth of what happens sometimes, and that's totally okay. Sometimes weird shit happens, and here's a surprise. It's impossible to always be perfect, and nobody is perfect. Okay, now my really dry brush. A wet brush right here would be really bad. Now, to really blend it in, I'm gonna use the chalk, which sounds silly, but it works. I'm gonna chalk blend it. And in a couple of days, when that chalk wears off, it's gonna look really good. I just finished painting another route here, and I wanna show you the difference between a paintbrush with a lot of paint on it and a pretty darn dry brush. So the one on the right is a lot of paint on the brush, and it's pretty thick, right? And it just kind of doesn't match. Now a really dry brush, this is what it looks like. Way better. Now this is a spot where nobody's ever gonna see it. I don't even need to paint this anchor. But yeah, painting it just because I figured this would be a good example to show you a big, thick amount of paint and a thin amount of paint. You can see on the left, the thin amount of paint is way nicer. All right, watch me here.
Nice shaking.
Keep me close.
Nice. Come on, so strong. Nice.
What?
Keep it up. Come on, hold it. Come on. Fight, fight, fight. Fuck yeah, Evan, come on. Yes, hold it.
Yeah! Sick!
He did it.